If you ever have a PC where every time you go to turn it on, all the fans and lights fire up, but you get no display out, it means more likely than not your system has failed to post. What does that mean? Well, POST is an acronym that stands for the Power On Self-Test that your motherboard runs on every single startup, checking the health and compatibility of all your internal hardware, like your CPU, RAM, GPU, and storage device, verifying the health and compatibility of each component. And like the name implies, this test takes place the second you turn your system on, all before you get a display out. And for a healthy system, this test only takes seconds. However, if one of the components does fail the testing for its health or compatibility, it'll stop your system from finishing the post sequence, letting you know something's up. In some circumstances, it might just be trying to protect itself. So how do you fix a post issue? Well, here's the sequence of testing I go through every time there's a post issue. First, before we dive internally, we need to talk about external issues. You usually want to check 3 things here. So although it may seem obvious, make sure you have your HDMI or DisplayPort plugged into your GPU. These are going to be the horizontally located ports directly connected to the graphics card itself. Make sure you're using these and not the HDMI on your motherboard. That may not even be active depending on your CPU. If you're having issues with no display, disconnect absolutely everything from the back of your motherboard or any USB connections besides a single display cable and your power cable. The only 2 things that are actually required for your system to display. Everything else could be interfering. And a silly issue, but I've seen it before, is just make sure your monitor's on and on the right input. Back to the internals, probably the most important thing that you can do on any modern motherboard is look for any kind of diagnostic LEDs. You can find these on pretty much any board from the last couple generations, at least halfway decent, and they basically tell you exactly what's wrong with the post sequence. See, there's actually 4 LEDs here. One for CPU, DRAM, VGA, and boot. One for each of the components tested in the post process. Normally, when your system is working, these will actually all cycle through, which will look something like this. But when there is an issue with one of your components, well, what's gonna happen is you'll notice that the LED that's lit up typically, depending on the motherboard, it may be 2 like this one, will let you know what's wrong. Or at least give you a starting point to diagnose your system. Because it's both a CPU and DRAM LED, more likely than not, we're dealing with a RAM issue. Usually when 2 or more are lit up, it's usually the second one causing the problem. Like in the case here, it's just loose RAM. For each LED, here's everything I would typically try. First, if you're only getting the CPU LED, I would personally start by just making sure that your CPU power cables are nice and secure. If they are, I'd recommend pulling your cooler off. This way you can pull your CPU out and check your motherboard pins. If they look good, go ahead and reseat your CPU. At that point, if you still have that CPU issue, it could mean your CPU is not compatible with your motherboard quite yet. As with multi-generational sockets these days, sometimes you need to run a BIOS update, so if you have a BIOS flash button, it might be time to use that. And if none of that works, more likely than not, you have a bad CPU.